The house on Winter Hollow Road. I never believed in haunted houses. Not truly. Sure, the idea had always fascinated me. Stories whispered at sleepovers, old tales passed down at family dinners, all those campfire cliches about creaking attics, moving shadows, and cold spots that couldn't be explained. But they were just that, stories, the stuff of thrillers and folklore, designed to tickle our fear without ever crossing into reality. So, when I inherited the old property on Winter Hollow Road, I didn't feel scared. If anything, I felt curious. Why had Uncle Raymond, the recluse none of us really knew, left it to me, the youngest, the least responsible, the most disinterested in family ties? My mother said it was because I reminded him of himself. That didn't exactly comfort me. I parked and stepped out of the car. The cold was deeper than it should have been. Not windy, but still, like walking into a freezer. As I approached the front door, I noticed strange marks etched into the wooden frame. Long, pale scratches, almost like something had clawed at it from the inside. I ran my fingers over them. Deep, old. My breath puffed out in slow clouds, and I laughed nervously to myself. Raccoons or something, I muttered. Still, I hesitated before turning the key. Inside, the air was stale and unmoved. It smelled of dust, old paper, and something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. The furniture was covered in white sheets, like a mausoleum of a life never lived. As I explored room by room, it became clear that no one had stayed here in decades, despite the fact that Uncle Raymond's will claimed he had lived here until his final days. No food, no clothing, just a few cold bookshelves and faded family portraits that watched me with tired, oil-painted eyes. I found the bedroom upstairs, mine now, I supposed. There was a brass framed bed, a dusty nightstand, and a small oil lamp that still had fuel. A single window overlooked the woods out back, where the trees grew too close together, their branches clawing into one another like fighting limbs. I stood there for a while, looking out at the dark, gnarled forest. That's when I heard it, a soft thump from somewhere below. I froze. Not a loud sound, not like a footstep or a door, just a shift, a weight, something settling. I told myself it was the house. Old beams, maybe a squirrel in the attic. I turned back to the room and unpacked my bag, but that quiet, creeping unease settled in beside me, coiling around my thoughts like fog around the trees. I didn't sleep much that first night. Every time I started to drift, the house would groan or whisper, just enough to yank me back. I kept seeing things in the corner of my eye, shapes that vanished when I looked directly at them, or shadows where shadows shouldn't be. At 3:12 a.m., I wrote the time down. I heard the creaking of the stairwell, step by slow step coming upward. No one was there. They don't like the light, it read. They wait until you forget to watch, until your mind softens. Keep the lights burning, even in your sleep. If they speak to you, Don't answer. If you answer, they will know your name. My hands were trembling as I finished reading. The writing was shaky, rushed, as if written in fear or haste. I folded the letter back into the book, unsure of what to believe. It was probably a prank, someone's attempt at a local legend, maybe even a sick joke left by Raymond. But still, I kept the lights on that night, every single one. And yet, at 3:12 a.m., they all went out, just like that. Every bulb, every lamp. Darkness swallowed the entire house. And in that moment, standing in the center of it all, I realized I was not alone. The whisper window. I didn't scream when the lights died. My instinct told me to run, but something deeper, something older, told me to stay still. Like a deer in a dark forest, sensing the eyes of a predator, I remained frozen. My heart thundered in my chest, sending echoes through my rib cage. The entire house was now a shadow of itself. No comforting hum of electricity, no dim glow from the corner lamps. Only black silence, broken only by the faint creak of wood somewhere deep below me. I clutched the wall with one hand, finding the texture of old wallpaper peeling like dried skin under my fingertips. I knew I had to move. Slowly, quietly. I turned to look at the window. I know I had shut it before bed. I remember the sticky resistance of the old wooden frame. But now the cold air was pouring in, and the thin curtains danced inward like they were being beckoned. The trees beyond swayed, but not from the wind. They were too synchronized, too slow, like they were breathing together. Then I heard it. A voice, no louder than a sigh, barely audible over the rustling fabric, yet it sliced through the dark like a whisper down a hallway. It said my name, just once. A quiet, almost reluctant echo of syllables that didn't belong to anyone I knew. It didn't come from inside the room or outside the window. It came from somewhere else, through the window. The sound passed through the glass, not as vibration, but as presence. I remembered the letter. If they speak to you, don't answer. If you answer, they will know your name. But they already knew my name. So what now? I backed away, careful not to speak, not even to breathe too loud. I shut the window slowly, and as I did, the voice didn't protest. It simply stopped, as though it had been a test, a dare, and I'd pass, for now. But the house had changed again. Downstairs, the front door was open just a crack. The same strange claw marks that decorated the frame outside were now etched faintly into the inside of the door. The wood was splintered, like something had pushed its way out, not in. I stepped outside and took a deep breath of cold morning air. It didn't help. The sky was overcast again, heavy and low, and the air still held that too cold stillness, like the world had forgotten how to turn. I considered leaving. I had my keys. I had my phone. But my suitcase was still inside. So was the letter. And something inside me, Something stubborn or stupid, or maybe both, needed answers. I returned inside and made a checklist of things to investigate: the attic, the basement, the cellar under the kitchen. I wanted to understand what I was dealing with, or at least convince myself it was all in my head. I started with the attic. A narrow stairwell led upward behind a panel in the hallway wall. The stairs were steep and creaked like wet bones. The door at the top wasn't locked, but it resisted opening, like it had been shut for years and had grown used to the silence. When it finally gave way, a gust of old, sour air greeted me. The attic was cluttered but dry, filled with furniture under sheets, crates of documents, and a single oil painting resting against the far wall. It was a portrait. A woman, seated in a red chair, wearing a black dress with a lace collar. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her face was turned slightly toward the painter, though her eyes looked past him, right at me, not in a painterly sense, in a literal one. The eyes were wrong, too real, glossy, as if wet, and they followed me. I circled the room, and those eyes never left mine. Not once. I lifted the corner of the canvas. Scribbled in small black ink on the back was the name, Amelia Rowe, the same name from the letter. Suddenly, the house creaked again, but this time it wasn't subtle. It came from the floor below me, a quick, heavy thump, like something had dropped from the ceiling or risen from the ground. In it, my reflection was pale and shaken, just as expected. But for a moment, just a flicker, there was someone standing behind me, a silhouette, too tall. No detail, just shape. I turned fast, but the attic was empty. I looked again at the mirror. Nothing. Just me. Still, I left the attic and didn't go back. That night, the lights didn't go out. They flickered. Off and on. Off and on. Like someone testing the wires, or trying to tell me something in Morse code. I sat in the corner of the room, phone gripped in one hand, flashlight in the other, and I thought, what do they want? Why me? And from the silence came the smallest sound. A laugh. A woman's laugh. Not cruel, not loud. Just very, very near. A door beneath the dust. The cellar. I hadn't dared to open it before. The door was tucked behind the kitchen, half concealed by an old hutch. I moved it aside now, revealing a square wooden trapdoor in the floor, sealed with a rusted iron latch. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, not the good kind, the kind with witches and missing children. I crouched down and ran my fingers along the latch. Cold, dented, but it opened easily, too easily, as if someone had recently been down there. The smell hit me first. Earth and mildew, old rot and damp wood. But under that, something metallic, like rusted iron and dried blood. I shined the flashlight into the opening and saw a steep staircase of stone, slick with moisture. A chill rose up from below, far colder than the rest of the house. My breath plumed in front of me, as I descended, the air tightening around my chest like a closing hand, and the shelves were filled with jars. I scanned the shelves, a wave of nausea rolling through me. Who had done this? Uncle Raymond? Amelia Rowe? Someone else? I reached out to touch one jar, then pulled back. The fluid inside was glowing faintly, like the soft pulse of a dying firefly. And then I saw the door. At the far end of the cellar, half swallowed by shadow, was a heavy wooden door set into the stone. It looked ancient, sealed with a twisted iron handle and bolted shut with a horizontal beam. Symbols were carved into the frame, intricate, looping patterns that seemed to swim if you looked at them too long. At the center of the door was a handprint, charred black, like someone had burned their hand into the wood. I stepped toward it, drawn by something I couldn't name. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then steadied. I reached out, not to open it, but just to feel it, when I heard the whisper again. This time, it wasn't my name. It was laughter. Dozens of voices, soft and layered, all laughing together, not cruelly, but joylessly. Hollow, as if laughter were something they had learned from humans and never quite understood. I staggered backward, knocking into one of the shelves. A jar toppled and shattered at my feet, its contents spilling onto the damp floor. I didn't stay to see what it was. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the trapdoor behind me and locking the latch. My heart pounded in my throat. I sank to the floor, every inch of my skin crawling with cold. And that's when I noticed it. The painting of Amelia Rowe was no longer in the attic, right outside my bedroom, and her eyes were smiling now. Shadows that remember. I left it alone and shut myself in the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the mattress and tried to think. What had I stepped into? The house wasn't just haunted, it was watching, learning, changing. The cellar with its jars, the door marked by a burned handprint, the whisper that now echoed with many voices, each moment layered itself on top of the last, and the weight of it all pressed on my chest like a block of ice. I decided to call someone, anyone, a priest, a historian, a friend. I pulled out my phone and froze. No signal. That was strange. I had full bars the day before. I walked from room to room, holding the phone high, then low, trying windows and doors, waving it like a divining rod. Nothing. I checked the settings, restarted the device. Still nothing. No bars, no Wi-Fi, no SOS. It was as if the house had simply stepped outside of time, outside of the world. I lifted my phone again. Still no signal. That's when I saw the first shadow. It stretched across the side of the house, tall and narrow, with elongated arms that curved in unnatural angles. I turned quickly, no one there. Just the side of the porch, and the bare dirt where the shadow had been cast. I looked back. The shadow was gone. I blinked, trying to shake off the chill crawling down my spine, and went back inside. That's when things truly began to spiral. The house started shifting around me, not all at once, subtly, insidiously. A door would open into the wrong hallway. A window would show trees I'd never seen before. The bedroom ceiling, which I'd stared at so many nights now, had new cracks running through it, cracks that looked like veins. I heard footsteps overhead, but there was no second floor above that room. Whispers began to drift through the vents, sometimes crying, sometimes humming, sometimes repeating the same 3 words over and over. Let us in. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. I avoided the hallway where Amelia's portrait hung. But no matter how many times I walked away, I always found myself back there. The painting moved when I wasn't looking. Sometimes an inch, sometimes across the entire hallway. Her expression changed too. The smile deepened. The skin around her eyes creased like they were crinkling with laughter. At one point, I passed the painting and found that someone, or something, had scratched 3 long claw marks down the canvas. Blood, not paint, oozed from the cuts. I tried to leave the house. I swear I did. But every door I opened led me back inside. Even the front door. I'd step through it and find myself in the hallway near the cellar, or in the dining room I hadn't touched. The house folded around me like a maze, a trick, and I realized it wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and it did not want me to go. That night, I didn't try to sleep. I barricaded myself in the bedroom, dragging the dresser in front of the door and wedging a chair beneath the handle. I sat with my back to the wall, and every light turned on. I held a knife I'd found in the kitchen. It was dull and old, but it felt better than nothing. Then, right as the clock struck 3:12 a.m., the lights all dimmed, but did not go out. A steady flicker took over, like the house was breathing. And in that quiet, steady pulse of shadow and light, I saw something begin to form in the far corner of the room. At first, it was smoke, black mist rising like steam. Then limbs, thin, jointed in the wrong places. A head tilted too far to one side. It didn't walk. It dragged itself across the wall and ceiling, upside down and soundless, like gravity didn't apply to it. Its face was just a void. No features, no mouth, no nose. But the eyes were holes of pure hunger. The cracks were gone. But above my bed, in large, black letters that hadn't been there before, written in a hand I didn't recognize, were the words, "The diary in the floorboards." I started in the attic. She mentioned the cellar. She mentioned the door. Over and over. And someone, maybe Amelia, maybe someone before her, had trapped something inside. Something that hated warmth. Only this time, it was clearer. 44 degrees. Climbing! And then I heard the cellar latch unlatch itself. The hutch was already pushed aside. The door was open, and tied to it, barely breathing, was the concession girl. Behind me, something stirred. The cold was the prison. The temperature was the lock. Paragraph 7. A prison that forgot it was a prison. And in the final blank page, a new sentence had appeared, one I hadn't written. Paragraph 10. The cold keeps watch. And then I was back. Not because I couldn't, but because I knew that whatever had followed me home, it wasn't bound by space anymore, not really. I had opened something, or maybe it had opened me. I was no longer sure where the threshold was, or if one had ever existed to begin with. The house, the rink, the ice, it was all the same place now. It was inside. The only choice left was simple: stay and let it take me quietly, or go back, return to the one place where the frost still listened, where names still meant something, where the cold could contain it, if only barely. So I went. The house stood empty when I arrived, but it was waiting. It knew I'd come. As I stepped through the door, I heard the lock click behind me, though I hadn't touched it. And then, silence. No hum of electricity. No creak of boards. Just the sound of my own breath fogging the air. I walked to the center of the house, what had once been the living room, and stood on the last intact patch of ice. It wasn't slick anymore. It had texture, like skin. The mirror across from me cleared, slowly, like a breath drawn backward. And there I was again. Only not me. It wore my face, but not my eyes. Its lips didn't move, yet I heard it clearly. We are awake now. Not I. We. All the names on the wall. All the people left behind. All the memories the cold had trapped like insects in amber. The entity didn't want revenge. It didn't want escape. It wanted inheritance, to pass itself forward. And I was its vessel. Unless someone stayed. The cold was a cage, yes, but also a seal. A spell. One that needed a living host. Someone to breathe through. Someone to remind it why it had been buried in the first place. And so, I stayed. Not because I'm brave. Not because I'm strong. But because I know what happens if I don't. The lights outside the house flicker now and then. Sometimes I hear kids skating in the rink, even when no one's there. The town moved on, built around the story, forgot what was buried. But I remember. I am the memory now. And as long as I sit in this chair, as long as I whisper to the ice, as long as I never forget the names carved into frost, it will stay quiet. It will stay cold. So please, if you ever walk by this place and see the windows fogged, or feel that chill in your bones, don't come inside. And whatever you do, don't say your name. Thank you for listening. This was The House on Winter Hollow Road, a chilling bedtime horror experience from Spooky Tales. If this story left you shivering or searching the shadows for familiar shapes, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so the next tale finds you when the lights are low. Because the next voice you hear might not be yours,